Thank you for joining me on today's episode of the Simply Financial podcast. This is your host, Christopher Calandra, and my goal is to increase your financial IQ with today's episode. If you've met with me over these many years, you might have heard me talk about retirement planning porn. That's a little tongue in cheek, but I do think that there's in the financial press and coming from Wall Street and major financial investment institutions, a certain amount of alarmist communication out to the public. There is an issue where there's far too many Americans that are not prepared for retirement. I grant you that. And there is ample evidence of that. But I think a lot of times, certain reports or certain communication out there are overly pessimistic and indicate that people are so much farther behind than they need to be. So I could talk about this probably for hours, but I just want to give you an example today of what I'm speaking about. So I recently read this new study from the National Institute on Retirement Security, and they looked at all workers between the ages of 21 and 64, and they included people who don't have any money saved. And what they found is in 401ks and 403bs, broadly called defined contribution plans, that the median balance was about $955, just a teeny tiny amount. So that doesn't sound good, and it isn't good. It does include people that haven't saved any money in that calculation. And I think that's where this goes off the rails, because there are certain people that don't have any money saved, and they should save, and there should be help and education and resources thrown at that problem. But you're dealing with people that haven't saved any money. I think it kind of misleads some of the numbers, because when they looked at, and median, by the way, do some quick math education here. Median means that half of the people in the survey had less than $955 and half had more than $955. It's not an average. When you looked at that group and you looked at the average, which is probably more commonplace on how we talk, the average was $93,000, $93,200 to be exact. So that, again, is the average. That includes people that say haven't saved any money. But if you include people that have a zero balance, it's only $955, because there's a decent chunk of people that don't have any money in 401ks. But one of the things I'll talk to you about today's episode, there might be a good reason why somebody has a zero balance. They could be very young and they haven't started saving yet. Should they save? Maybe. But that's very much a different problem than somebody that doesn't have any money at, say, 60 years old. It could be that somebody doesn't have any money saved because it's sort of an encore career. It's their last part-time job before they fully retire, and they may not be saving anymore. It could be a spouse that doesn't put money in the 401k because they're not the major breadwinner and it's a part-time job. All of those things are reasonable and are not necessarily something to be overly worried about. It's a complicated issue, of course. Now, going back to the average, if you only count people that have at least $1 in their defined contribution plan, again, 401k, 403b type stuff, the balance jumps up to $179,000. Now, that number may not be outstanding, but I think it's better than expected and not something that jumps off the page as a problem. Keep in mind what I read with this National Institute on Retirement Security, the emphasis, the lead was on the $955 median. I'm going to be a little critical. It seems like they wanted to take the number that was the worst and communicate that out, because that might sell more, get more clicks and articles and attention than $179,000 average account balance for people with at least $1 in the plan. So a little critical of the National Institute. I don't know anybody there, and they're probably fine people, but it does irk me a bit. Here's where I want to go next, though, is there is, according to the Federal Reserve, as of 2025, there is a total of $11 trillion in defined contribution plans. $11 trillion. That's spread across a ton of different Americans. Some people have zero balance, as we've already touched on. Some people have multi-million dollars in there and everything in between, but the total is 11 trillion. But if you want some good news, I have some good news for you. And that is most of the retirement money that Americans have is not in their 401ks. It's in their IRAs. The National Institute on Retirement Security didn't touch on this whatsoever, but it's important. It's important for a better context of what's going on. There is, again, according to the Federal Reserve, $18 trillion in total in IRAs. This is as of 2025 again. So there's $7 trillion more in IRAs than there are in 401ks. And when you combine the two, you get $25.2 trillion, which seems to me to be a pretty impressive number. I know it's divided unequally with too many people having zero, and maybe you might think too many people having multi-million dollar balances, but $25.2 trillion is a ton of money that Americans have set aside for their retirement. Let me add, there's another $3.1 trillion in the old-fashioned defined benefit plans. Read that to be pension plans. You might work for a police force or the U.S. government or a local municipality and have a defined benefit pension plan. There's another $3 trillion there, which brings the grand total up to $28.3 trillion. Again, to me, a very impressive number in the overall scheme of things. Now, why is there more money in IRAs? There's a multitude of reasons. Some people don't have access to defined contribution plans like 401ks, and they use their IRAs instead. Still, other people might use their IRA in lieu of their 401k. A big component of this is when someone leaves the employ of their company. They get fired, they get laid off, they quit, the business closes. A ton of those people don't leave the money in the 401k, but rather roll it over to an IRA. There's a lot of reasons for that. We won't get into it in this episode, but that's one of the very key reasons why there are more dollars in IRAs as opposed to defined contribution plans. So there's lots of other reasons too, but those I think are three of the major ones. So I found that the first study, the National Institute on Retirement Security, was a bit depressing, but I wanted to paint a rosier picture for you and maybe for me a little bit, because what I've experienced over my 30+ year career is that an awful lot of Americans are on their way or have prepared for financial security. They might not live the most lavish of lives, but they aren't necessarily set up for utter failure, like they need to live in their car or be forced into living with their children when they may not want to do that. I think it's a much rosier picture. Hopefully I've communicated that to you. Oftentimes when you look at studies, they are overly depressed. They are leading with the worst indicators they can find as opposed to being positive. And I think they're doing a disservice to the American people. Although, again, like I stipulated at the top of the show, there is still far too many Americans that do legitimately fall under the category are unprepared and needing help in getting prepared for retirement security. So that's today's episode. I was really excited for this topic. Hopefully that came across and you found it to be worthwhile information. I'll be back with you on the next episode of the Simply Financial Podcast very soon. In the meantime, subscribe to the show if you haven't done so already, and check out the work we do here at Elliott Wealth Management Services, especially helping our clients be retirement ready. Thanks and have a great day.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of Osaic Wealth, Inc., and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of information provided at these websites. Nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues, or any consequences arising out of your access to or your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through Osaic Wealth, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management Services, LLC, not affiliated with Osaic Wealth, Inc.